Hi everyone, welcome to the session 2 of the uh, topic 1, chapter 1, which is on data management as part of the Certified Data Management Professional CDMP certification. Now what we are going to do is we're going to continue with our journey from where we left last time. We'll starting with the topic was on the different types of data that we'll be looking into. Now typically if you see the data that we have, managing the data is made more complicated. There could be different types of data that could be existing as part of the overall life cycle management. Now, any management system needs to kind of classify these objects that are being managed, and it could be classified based on the type of the data that you have, whether it could be transactional data, reference data, master data, metadata. Also, it could be based on the category data, the resource data, event data, the transactional data, or it could be with respect to the content. Let's say, for example, what the data domains, the subject areas, or by format or the level of protection that the data requires. Now, data could also be classified by how and where it is being stored or accessed. Right? Now, different types of data will have different requirements, and they are associated with the different types of risk that could be inherent to it. Right? So, there we also will have to understand what are these different risks, what are the different components that could be useful. Right? So, for example, master data will have different uses, and consequently, there could be different management requirements that would be associated to it. Now, we'll spend some time to understand the data and the risk factor. Now, data not only will represent the value, but it also represents the risk that is associated. Now, for example, the low quality data definitely, represents a kind of a risk, but, low quality data could be like inaccurate data, incomplete data, or out of date data. So obviously it will represent a kind of a risk because the information would not be right at that sense, right? But data is also risky because sometimes what happens is it is being misunderstood or it is being misused in that perspective. Now, organizations, if you see, will get the most value of their high quality data, like for example, data which is available, which is relevant, which is like complete, which is meaningful, which is understood, which is consistent, which is timely, which is usable, right? So they will use this for any of their important decisions, right? So difference between what we know and what we need to know will always make a kind of an effective decision making, right? At the same time, you'll see that the information gaps which are there. Now, there would be some information gaps that would be associated that will basically help you to understand, what is the kind of data that is associated, how the enterprise liabilities could be there, right? So information gaps primarily represent this kind of, the enterprise liabilities, which would be there with respect to the potentially profound impacts that could be associated on the operational effectiveness and the profitability. And organizations that recognize the high value of this data can also take kind of a concrete proactive steps so that they can try to improve the quality and the usability of this data and the information that could be useful for any of their regulatory requirements, any of their cultural frameworks that they have, right? Now, if you see, there is an increased role that information has with respect to the organizational asset across all the different sectors that has led to a kind of an increased focus by regulators and the legislators on the potential uses and the abuses of information. Now, from Sarbanes-Oxley Act, if you remember, which is more on the financial transactional data, they also focus a lot on the accuracy of the data that is being reported, the validity of the data that is being presented, right? And like that, you will have multiple types of regulations, like there are data privacy regulations also that will say how the data is being processed, how the data is being stored, how the data is being, residing in which all regions, in which data centers. It's all something that is being very highly focused. Likewise, as the consumers becomes more aware of their entire data, they will not expect not only that it becomes more smoother and it becomes more efficient as part of their operations and processes, but the protection of their entire information and the privacy aspect is also something becomes very important. That means the scope of the entire strategic stakeholders are not only the internal stakeholders but also the data management professionals that would be associated as part of the overall program. Now, interestingly, if you see the balance sheet, impact of information management, which will be there, a lot of time this is one of the very important topics that comes on coming in most of the discussions. And this also arises when the risks are not managed and the shareholders who are there might not be having a very good clarity about the overall aspect of the data, right? So these are some of the pointers that they will keep on highlighting over a period of time, which needs to be managed very well. Now, coming with respect to the technology aspect, now as you know, the technology is one of the enablers as part of the overall life cycle. So, as we have been discussing, that the data management activities are quite wide ranging, and it will require a lot of both of their technical and business skills, right? So that is one of the things that you will see that uh, you know largely technology is something that you cannot completely separate it out, stating that I'm just a business organization, right? Because right from its inception, the concept of data management has been very closely understood with respect to the technology aspect, right? Now that is something that will continue to exist, and that will remain. And in many organizations, you'll see that there is an ongoing tension that will be existing between the technology leaders will try to drive the technology, implementations and applications and onboarding of different technologies. And there would be a decision from the business, a drive from the business that will say that they want to have a more reliable data that they want to have, right? Now, this is something that they should both go hand in hand, because ultimately, it is an overall objective that they are trying to achieve. They are trying to solve the problem at hand. And that's the reason you'll see that successful data management will also require sound decisioning about the entire technology, right? But managing the technology is not the same as managing the underlying data within the technology. Now, understanding this entire aspect with respect to technology and data, there is a kind of a subtle difference, because you have to manage the technology, managing the data within that will also require some kind of additional efforts, right? So that is something that is getting a lot of prominence these days, because now organizations are slowly understanding this aspect with respect to they are getting this point that it is not that technology managing the technology will help in managing the underlying data. It is something that is has to be taken up as a agenda in itself. Now, coming back to how do you basically require the point that when we were discussing that uh, you know that data management will also require some kind of a hand holding from the management perspective, right? So effective management will also require some. The next topic that we're going to do is with respect to understanding how effective data management will require some kind of a leadership commitment, right? Now, if you take there was a manifesto which was came out in 2017, which is the Leaders Data Manifesto. It primarily tried to recognize that the organization's best opportunities for organic growth will lie in the data, right? So almost all organizations try to align on this principle, where they try to recognize that data is an asset for them, right? A lot of organizations initially were not very much data driven, but then looking at their competitors or understand the impact that they are primarily, data is trying to create in their own organization, even after underestimating the entire efforts which data is able to do, they had recently started understanding that there is a kind of an intrinsic value that data tries to put in, and that is something where organizations are trying to set up and trying to drive these data initiatives. Now, one of the important aspect is the role of a chief data officer, right? So the role of a chief data officer, tries to stems from the entire recognition that managing the data presents a kind of different types of unique challenges, and successful data management must be also business driven, rather than it should be more of an IT driven kind of an objective. And a CDO can primarily drive these initiatives, you can say, with respect to leveraging the data assets which in the organization, and they will be able to leverage the assets to gain competitive advantage from them, right? So a CDO not only leads these initiatives, but that person CDO will also be uh, you know kind of lead by example, and will ensure that we should be able to explain the benefits, the intrinsic benefits that the organization would be able to get if they are able to manage data effectively. Now, coming back to what kind of a strategy that data management strategy that you will require to have. Now, a strategy, in very simple terms, you can say, is a kind of a set of choices and decisions that together, try to create a kind of a path or a course that can help you to achieve the high goals, right? Now, let's say, for example, if you take the game of chess, right? So when you start playing chess, you try to intrinsically think about what are the steps that I would be able to use so that I can beat my opponent, right? So based on each of the move, you try to visualize what are the next steps that the opponent might be taking. So the strategic plan is more like a high level course of action that you want to take when you want to achieve a specific goal, right? Now, the strategic data strategy primarily should include these kind of business plans that you want to start the information for the competitive advantage and support the enterprise goals. Now, data strategy must come from an understanding of the overall data. It will require an inherent needs and inherent in the business strategy, as well as what the data the organization will require, how it will get this data from, how it will manage it, and how it will also ensure the reliability over time, how it will be utilized, right? So typically a data strategy will require a kind of supporting the data management program strategy, right? For example, it will include a kind of a plan for maintaining and improving the quality of the data integrity, the access, the security aspects, where it is able, while it is able to mitigate the known and implied risk that is associated. Now, the strategy must also address some of the known challenges which are related to data management. Now, in many of these organizations that you will see, the data management strategy which is there will be owned and maintained by the chief data officer, right? And it would be enacted through a central data governance team. There would be a data governance council. Now, often the chief data officer will draft an initial data strategy and a data management strategy even before a data governance council has been formed, so that the senior management commitment is being established regarding the data governance, stewardship, and uh, practices that they want to come and present to the management that they would be able to bring in. Right now, this is primarily some of the methods that you will see that is being established as part of the overall objective that you want to set up. Now, coming back to what are the different types of components, what you want to see as part of a data management strategy. Now, the data management strategy will have different types of components. Now, it's very important to understand what are these components and how these components will start helping us and should be start, coming in and required to be formed. Now, these are some of these components of the data management strategy. Now, the data management strategy should include a kind of a compelling vision for the data management. It should include a kind of a summary business case for the data management, which there should be some selected examples that should be there. Then it should be represented with some kind of guiding principles, values, and management perspectives that you have, the mission and the long-term directional goals that you should have, the proposed measures of the data management success, it should be there. Then there should be a short-term data management program objectives that you have. That should be like SMARTs, right, which are like specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. At the same time, the descriptions of the data management roles and organizations should have a summary of the responsibilities and decision rights. It should have the descriptions of the data management program components and initiatives, and also a prioritized program of work with the scope boundaries that you define clearly. There should also be like a draft implementation roadmap with the project and the action items that should be available. These are some of the kind of the components that any of your data management strategy should be including. Okay. Now, based on that, what are the kind of deliverables that strategic planning for data management should have, right? So there should be always some objectives that should have deliverables. The first component, there should be a kind of a data management charter. Now, data management charter should primarily include the overall vision and mission, the business goals that you have, the guiding principles, the measures of success, the success factors, the critical success factors, risk, and also the operating models and similar kind of things. Then there should be a data management scope statement. Data management scope statement should have like the goals and the objectives for any kind of a planning horizon. Like for example, usually 3 years you can consider the roles, organizations, and the individual leaders who are accountable for achieving these objectives. That is also very important as part of the overall scope statement. Then it should also have the data management implementation roadmap, like for example, identifying the specific programs, the projects, the task assignments, and the different types of delivery milestones. Right? So data management strategy should address all these kind of data management framework knowledge areas relevant to the organization. So this is something that I wanted to cover as part of the session 2. In the next session, primarily what we'll do is we'll start with the different types of data management frameworks that are associated and that will be useful for different organizations as part of their entire data management strategy. So I will see you in the next session. Till then, have a nice time. Bye.